remarkable as he talked and responded to people. Because one of the things that I find as we go through life is when I watch the news and I see different things going on, is I see a whole lot of people standing up for themselves. I have rights. And especially when we watch the debates, you see people, not only do they stand up for themselves, but they're like cutting each other down all the time. You know, and then they say things like, well, I'm not going to lower myself to a negative campaign, but, well, when you just said I'm not going to lower myself to a negative campaign, you just did lower yourself. Do you get that? You know, a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to lower myself to responding to that. Well, you just did respond. And you just did go in the gutter. So look at the words of how Jesus responded as he was going through something that was not the easiest thing. Just think for a second, for 33 years, for 33 years as Jesus was growing up, he knew this was coming. He knew death on the cross was going to happen. And he knew it was not going to be a fun deal. And yet, as all that came towards him, look and see what he said. We're going to actually start in verse 66 of Luke 22. And our main emphasis is going to be on how did Jesus respond? Did he respond in any way to defend himself or to say, don't you know who I am? Any of those things. Just listen and see how he responded. So in verse 66 it says, as soon as it was day, the elders of the people, both chief priests and scribes, came together and led him into their council, saying, if you are the Christ, tell us. But he said to them, if I tell you, you will by no means believe. Obviously, Jesus had had a few interactions with these spiritual leaders. These were the people that were the big shots in the church of that day. They were the ones that had everything, quote, going for them. But they did not believe. No matter what he said, they would not believe. So that's why he said that. In verse 68 it says, and if I also ask you, you will by no means answer me or let me go. So he's looking right into their hearts and he's saying right out loud, you know what, kind of no matter what I say here, I'm in trouble. That's what he's saying. And then verse 69 is so poetic. He says, hereafter the Son of Man will sit on the right hand of the power of God. What a prophetic thing to say. He's talking about the Son of Man, so he's talking about himself, of course. And then, of course, we know he's talking about himself. Right when we look in verse 70, it says, then they all said, are you then the Son of God? They were thinking that they were going to be able to get him to fall into their trap. Because if he said he was God, then he's blaspheming. And if he's blaspheming, of course, he can be put to death. So they're putting him up to the test. And what does he say? You rightly say that I am. So, you know, there's a lot of people that say, oh yeah, Jesus never said he was God. How can you read that verse and not say that he said he was God? He clearly said it there. And there's other places where he clearly demonstrated that he was God. And then, of course, verse 71, and they said, what further testimony do we need? For we have heard it ourselves from his own mouth. And then they handed him over. And then verse 23, chapter 23, it goes into the things. It says, then the whole multitude of them arose and led him to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, we found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king. Then Pilate asked him, saying, are you the king of the Jews? He answered him and said, it is as you say. There we go. In 5 verses, 2 times Jesus has said, yep, you're correct. It's as you say. But notice how Jesus is always responding to people that are coming to him with things, and he is not pushing things on them. You see, Jesus is the ultimate example of a way I believe that we need to work with people as we talk with people. Too many times when we want to share Jesus with people, we get so excited, we run in and we rush in and we say, let me tell you something, this is what you need. You need Jesus, you need, And the first thing we need to do is we need to ask people, are you open to having a conversation about Jesus and what he means to me? And if they say, no, I'm not in that place yet, I do them a disservice if I push further and try to tell them what I know they need. It's just like, has anybody heard the phrase of, you don't want to try to help a wolf that is wounded? Okay? If you have a wild animal that is wounded and in pain, and you go and you try to help that wild animal, you're probably going to get bit. Okay? You see, we have to be very perceptive and understand where people are coming from and respect them enough to ask them, are you open to having a conversation? And when they say yes, then we go further. And when they say no, we go, okay. And we keep praying for them. And we keep worshiping God. And we keep calling God to work in their lives. And God will continue to work in their lives. And a little bit at a time, as they respond to us, then we can share. I believe the verse says, be ready to give an answer for the hope that is within you. It doesn't say, force it down everybody's throat, the hope that is within you. It doesn't say that. Okay? See how Jesus is, people are coming to him and saying these things, and he goes, yes, you say correctly. And I can just see Jesus' entire demeanor throughout this is very, very eloquent and very humble and very soft and just very simply saying, I know this is going to happen. You don't have a clue what you're doing. And I can see that. But I'm just going to tell you the truth. You see, that is the way we need to be. And the only way we can be that is if Jesus helps us. We need to be indwelled and filled with the Holy Spirit so we can do that as we follow Christ. So verse 4, Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, I find no fault in this man. But they were the more fierce, saying, he stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place. Then verse 6, then Pilate heard of Galilee. He asked if the man were a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him off to Herod. And he was also in Jerusalem at that time. So we know what happens. He sends him off to Herod and thinks, oh boy, I can pass the buck, because I don't want to deal with this thing. And then, of course, Herod looks at things and says, oh, no, and you got to go back. And so all of that stuff happens. And then the stuff happens with Barabbas, where everybody says, yes, we would rather have somebody who is a robber and a really, really bad person. We'd rather have them release him to us. Amazing stuff that they go through. But I'm going to jump ahead to verse 26 in Luke chapter 23. It says, now as they led him away, they laid hold of a certain man, Simon Cyrenian, who was coming from the country, and on him they laid the cross that he might bear it after Jesus. So, of course, Simon helps to carry the cross the rest of the way up to where Jesus was going to be crucified. And a multitude of the people followed him, and women who also mourned and lamented him. So you've got a lot of people that are mourning and seeing what is going on. Look at verse 28 in Luke chapter 23. But Jesus, turning to them, said, see, now he's already been beaten. He is dripping. He is on his last legs. And look what he says to these people. Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. So, have you ever been in a situation where you saw something that was happening, and as you watched it happen, you easily started to look at the situation and go, man, I'm glad I'm not in that situation. I'm glad I've got it okay. Jesus was speaking exactly to that situation. The other day I was driving downtown, and a couple guys started fighting right in the middle of the street. They were like wrestling and rolling around, on the edge of the sidewalk. And I was a little shocked as I drove by. But here came somebody from the other side, and he had his phone, and he was taking a video of it. I almost ran him over because he was walking right out in the middle of the street with his phone. Isn't that the way we are in our society? When other people are doing stuff that's really bad, there's a little piece of us that goes, man, I'm glad I'm not as bad as them. We all do it. I'm first to raise my hand. Okay? Jesus was talking right to the heart of these women. He was talking right to the heart of everybody because his heart was in the right place. He was giving his life to save us. He knew how things were going to work out at the end. He knew he was going to rise from the dead, even though he was going through a really hard situation. He knew all of that was coming, and he could see the pity on their face as they looked at him, and he was saying, do not weep for me. Instead, weep for yourself. You see, Jesus is very personal with his offer of salvation for each and every one of us. And as soon as we start to compare ourselves to other people and say, oh, I'm not as bad as them, and oh, I'm going, then we are in trouble. So see what happens. Here's what he says, verse 29. For indeed the days are coming in which they will say, blessed are the barren. In other words, it'd be better that you never had kids at all. Wombs that never bore. In other words, wombs never had children. And breasts that were never nursed. The love of a mother for their child is one of the most amazing things. And everybody sees cute little kids and they go, oh, kids are so cute. And it's so great when they love their mom and they love them back. Isn't that a wonderful thing? What Jesus is saying here is that you, if you do not have me in your life, will rue the day that you even had children. That's what he's saying. Look at verse 30. He says, then they will begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to hills, cover us. You see, Jesus wasn't just talking about what is going to happen in the end times when tribulation is going to start to happen. Jesus was talking about the end of all time, when every person is judged for how they have responded to what he is about to do very shortly on the cross for each individual personally. What he is saying is that the most heinous thing about hell, the fiercest thing about hell, is the fact that people want to die. They want those mountains to fall on them. They want the pain to end, but it never will end. And for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, people will be in constant pain, constant agony, constant disappointment about what they chose to do and that they chose to not receive. See, the regret will constantly be with each individual. Each individual in hell will know that they had a chance to receive forgiveness, which would have been the sweetest thing to take all of this away, but they did not take it. And every second of every day that goes on, and they don't even know it's a day or a night because it goes on and on and on. There's no light in hell anyway. So it's just, even using the term day is not right. It's just a constant blur